Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is John Adams. Today we're going to look at the M2 iPad Pro versus the M2 Air. The question is, which one of these is the best for you in your purchasing price? Because right now when you're looking at these two devices, they are very, very similar. And so if the price is roughly the same, which one should you buy? Now I've done a ton of recent iPad videos. This is probably the last of them comparisons, but this is the comparison that people were asking me for the most, because when you're looking at the M2 iPad Air and the M2 iPad Pro, these are so extremely similar in everything, price, all of that. And so it's kind of the most confusing iPad that you can have. So first, let's look at the outside. They're both just gorgeous iPads. This one's already a little bit scratched on accident, my bad. But as you can see, the cameras up top, you got one camera on the iPad Air, and you've got the multiple cameras, the wide angle camera and the regular camera with the LiDAR sensor on the Pro. Now, as I've said in most of my videos about iPads, you don't really use a camera on an iPad all that much, and so the fact that the iPad Air has this single camera, it's just not a big deal at all.
Hey, Editor John here, real quick caveat. Somebody in my comments below very, very kindly said they disagree with me on this, that retail stores actually use the camera on the back of an iPad all the time, and that makes total sense. Like when you go through a retail store, people are using iPads all the time, so that was actually something I'd never thought of, so that was really brilliant. So thanks to that person, I can't remember their name right now, but thanks to them, that does change my thoughts a little bit on it, but retail stores versus like the amount of people that buy iPads, it doesn't really change stuff all that much, so that's just a quick caveat.
They both have the 3 dots. You can connect it to a port or a folio case for the keyboard. Now, you cannot use the new keyboard on the old iPad, and you cannot use the old keyboard on the new iPad. So you're gonna have to, if you're gonna upgrade to the 13 M2 Air, you're gonna have to buy a new keyboard, all that kind of stuff. Now, the cool thing with the iPad Pro is that you can find this used with some really great prices out there. And so I highly recommend that people search around, see what other prices there are, other places that are selling it. You can get really good deals. When we're looking at the thinness of these two devices, they're almost identical. The iPad Air is a little bit thicker. It's definitely heavier than the iPad Pro. The iPad Pro is a little bit thinner, but man, honestly, if you don't have these two things in your hands, you are not going to be able to tell at all. Now, there is a difference in the speakers. There's a little bit of a difference from the 4 speakers that the iPad Pro has to the 2 style speakers that the iPad Air has. However, in practice, it is really not that big of a deal. Screens on these two iPads are absolutely gorgeous. There is a single big difference. Now, the biggest difference on these screens is with the Pro model, you actually get the 120 hertz display, which just comes across smooth. Apple calls it their Pro Motion display, whereas on the Air, you do not get that. Now, you do actually notice this a little bit when you are using an Apple Pencil. When you're using an Apple Pencil, it is gonna feel a little bit like choppy, just a little bit, if you are used to the 120 hertz display with the Apple Pencil. It is just smoother no matter what. And so if you're an artist, you definitely probably wanna go with the Pro because it's just got more features. It also has Thunderbolt 4 on the USB-C port, and so it's not just a USB-C port, it actually is a full Thunderbolt 4 port, and so you have extremely fast transfer speeds with this. Whereas when you are looking at the M2 Air, that is just a regular USB-C port, so it's not super fast. Now, another major difference is with the iPad Air, it is not Face ID enabled, where with the iPad Pro, it is, and so if Face Unlock is a big deal for you, that's cool, but the Touch ID is so fast that for me, I haven't noticed any time where I've been like, oh my gosh, I really wish I had Face ID with this. It's just like you tap the thing and it instantly unlocks. Now, I do want to look at this comparison page real quick, and so if you can see this right here, I have the 11-inch iPad Pro and the 13-inch iPad Air. They both have the M2 chip, like I said, which is 8 cores, an 8-core CPU, 10-core GPU. That's a super powerful chip. I mean, you can do everything you need to do on either of these two devices. You do not need to go up to the M4 to edit video and edit photos and all that. It's got 4K video ProRes, like that's cool. I've never once used ProRes on an iPad, so that doesn't matter to me. The landscape front camera is kind of a big deal on the iPad Air because when you're doing meetings, you don't have to have it in that vertical orientation. You can have it landscape like everybody wants to use an iPad. And when you do some kind of FaceTime call or a Zoom meeting, something like that, it is in the correct orientation. I want to make my way down to the display right here. As you can see, They're both 264 pixels per inch, which means everything is extremely sharp. That's really nice. It's 600 nits of brightness max. That's not super bright when you go outside, but most people use their iPad inside anyways, and so that's not that big of a deal. But it also has the same screen. These are not mini LEDs. These are LED backlit multi-touch display with IPS technology. If you were going to go up to the 12.9 M2 Pro, then it would be the mini LED, but it is not. And guess what? Even with the new tandem OLED screen, I don't find all that big of a deal on the differences of the blacks and the whites and the colors, like all the saturation. They all look fantastic. And when you don't have them one right next to each other, which most people are not going to have them to kind of A/B comparison, they're good enough. Battery life on both these devices has been absolutely phenomenal. It's multiple days for each of them. I've never ran into a moment where I was like, man, I really wish I had a ton more battery on my iPad, which is awesome news because that just means iPads are in such a great place. But the real factor for what you're gonna make this decision on is probably going to be the screen. Yes, the price, I mean, they're like within $50 of each other. They're hitting about $800. I saw a couple of the iPad Pro M2s for like $700, $750, so not that big of a difference. But I would still go with the M2 Pro because that Pro motion display, it is a really wonderful experience. If you're somebody who's an artist, you're definitely gonna want to have the Pro display because it just makes things so much smoother when you're using Photoshop, if you're using brushes or anything like that. It is just a better overall experience having the Pro motion display and having that USB-C port also be a Thunderbolt 4 port. That's just massive for anybody who's gonna do some like photo editing or video editing. Transferring huge files, it does take a lot of time. And so for me, when I'm recommending between the 13-inch M2 Air and the 13-inch M2 Pro, I'm typically gonna go with the Pro. Now, if you're really on a budget, you can go down to the 11-inch M2 Pro or the 11-inch M2 Air. That will save you a little bit of money. But over the life of this device, like this M2 Pro right here has so much life left in the iPad. Like it just still functions perfectly. Everything about it, I've never once felt like the chip is saturated. It works amazingly. And so I don't think like the functionality of these two is all that different, but it really does come down to that display for me. And you can get better used prices. You can check Facebook Marketplace. And so yes, it's nice to have the new device because you've got like a year or two of extra updates added, but this M2 Pro is going to last years and years and years. And so I still highly recommend it. So for me, the question that everybody has been asking is what should they get? Should they get the M2 Pro or get the M2 Air? I think you should get the M2 Pro. As time goes on, the M2 Pro is gonna get even cheaper and even cheaper. And I can tell you this, I promise you this, even going back to the M1 or even the iPad mini, like none of them feel like they're saturating the chip. None of them feel slow. And so you don't need to go all the way up in price to the M4. This M2 is gonna last a really long time. So tell me in the comments below, which of these two iPads are you looking at? Would you rather have that Pro display with all the 120 Hertz, or would you rather have a little bit more screen size with the 13-inch Air? Tell me. Appreciate you guys. Hit like if you found this helpful. I appreciate it. Sub to the channel. I'll see you all in the next one.